borrowing from tomorrow. I remind myself about this one and try to think back to my late teens, early 20s, where that stage in my life I was still very much operating from this premise. Not so much as a philosophy and way of being, but just almost being a consequence of circumstances and decision making that would be riding on this kind of cultural reassurance about youth and the additional risk taking or kind of throwing caution to the wind that is common at that life stage, to kind of think, oh well, I can get away with this actually, it'll be fine. If you spend enough time operating from this place, burnout is almost certainly on the cards. And having traversed that pathway and the kind of subsequent rehabilitation process to scrape yourself back up from the proverbial floor, I wouldn't recommend it. It's it's not an enjoyable ride for sure. But I do still like to remind myself of, okay, in the check-in, in the pause point, in the space that I try to build into my schedule now, which is designed in such a way that it's there to try and give me a purposeful moment in time where I can actually make an assessment on what is the resource available to me. What am I trying to achieve with the resource I have? Is it possible? Do I need to make a reasonable adjustment to the schedule or to my expectations? And I mention this, from a few different perspectives, but primarily speaking to this right now from the point of view of being solo working in business and having to be not only the doer and the strategist and the coordinator and planner, but also the voice of reason or the kind of the well-being practitioner that steps in and says, hold on a second, how are we managing our time and energy and resource today? And is this conducive to a long-term pathway of success that is actually focused on the kind of sustaining piece and the balance and the resilience pieces? Because ultimately we're trying to strive for the long game here, and when you do have limited support resources and frameworks around you that kind of equate to actual physical people or resources that you can pull in from external spaces, and you're having to be in that role of creating time and space for cultivation to actually build up reserves, so that on days where it maybe is a case of a deadline or something unexpected or just the peaks and troughs of life that do set new bars for us to strive towards and challenges for us to meet, that sometimes it is necessary to put a little bit of, pedal to the metal and actually increase that fuel to the tank, increase that acceleration. But for that to be a continual strategy that we apply in terms of how we do manage our energy. No, it is not sustainable long term, and also something that I feel is important to mention in that same breath is that it does mean that the more we do this and start to become familiar with that approach as a kind of like, oh, right, one last push and we'll just get it done. We start to kind of become desensitized actually to that check-in, because there is an element of perhaps having to dismiss a part that says, actually, I don't know if I feel very happy about this. And the more we do that, the more we are going over our own boundary or crossing a line or a limit that we have set, and we are kind of undermining that by making that choice that might in that moment be a conscious choice of, this is maybe not the ideal situation, but this is something that I feel I need to do. But the nuance of when does something like that happens every so often and is kind of a part of navigating territory that has unexpected things that come onto our plate, where's the tipping point from that into what is actually, oh, well, I did that last time, or remember that time when I actually pushed through and I managed to get that done, and probably I could meet this new deadline that someone's given me, and that becomes woven into that more familiar territory of the self-talk and the rationalization piece of what we feel we can do or should do, which is actually the first thing that emerges in that intellectual response, rather than the check-in with the body of how does this feel, and am I giving myself enough time to allow all these different parts of myself to orient to this new demand that I am making to help inform my decision about whether or not to go ahead with this, and to apply more pressure to myself. So to tie it back into this struggle that does come from solo working, from doing things independently out with a core team and having to step into all of these different roles, it's been the case, I would say, for me, that I've had to really make an effort to ensure that kind of well-being focused aspect always has a seat at the table and always gets priority to express itself, almost as if, from a diversity point of view, the well-being part is maybe a voice that is overshadowed often by all of these other aspects that are kind of want to take over and want to be in the driver's seat. But the well-being part is actually the wisdom of the body and the wisdom of how do I feel about this? Is this a good idea? Whose expectation am I trying to meet with this demand that I'm making on myself? So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because it's a kind of a big subject, and there are lots of parallel threads and lots of nuance in there. So in that sense, there's ample space for for those of you that feel that you have some wisdom or reflection to share from your own approach to working, but also to life, relationships in your kind of professional environment as well. How does this show up for you? How do you address it? Do you give time and space to dialogue with that part that is actually more in tune with your battery levels than perhaps yes, the little general, as I've heard it called, or the director, or these archetypes, let's say, that are focused on achieving and striving and meeting goals and deadlines, that operate very effectively in that role, but maybe fail to incorporate that long-term and holistic viewpoint that is inclusive of and sensitive to at what cost. Because if I'm borrowing energy from tomorrow, what does tomorrow look like? And if this is a pattern that continues to happen, what is the shape of my daily day-to-day experience over a kind of a long-term trajectory? And what nick am I in at the end of the year, when I come to not necessarily a grinding halt, but possibly a crash. So yeah, just something that I've been thinking about in tandem with the seasonal shifts and adjustment of energy, and also just been reflecting on this week as I've kind of shuffled a few things around, adjusted the schedule to accommodate for a slower pace, which has not moved the priority tasks. All it's done is make space for there to be a quality of recovery that allows me to be able to meet those tasks with the fullness of what is required for me to explore them in a way that does them justice, but not at the expense of my own health. So it is an ongoing process. It's not easy. Sometimes you have to kind of grab yourself by the shoulder, as it were, and say, pause. And all of this I'm sharing anecdotally, through the lens of my experience and using those examples. It's about who you are as a person as well, and what your temperament is. It's not about work ethic, but it's about how do you approach tasks and how do you problem solve. Once you get your teeth stuck into something, are you like a dog with a bone and struggle to let it go? And do you have that ability to healthily detach and to come away and to revisit and reintegrate into things? It's a lot about knowing your learning style. Knowing your attachment style can be really helpful. Something that I've been exploring in more depth, actually, in relation to the way that I meet work tasks, is interesting to think about, going back to actual relational patterns, and how this really shapes and informs the way that you decide to engage your energy with something that you are focused on, because that is ultimately it's energy management. So on that note, I'm going to go and make myself a cup of tea, and hope you give yourself time and space to enjoy at least one today. So yeah, just 5 minutes of reconnection time for yourself, whatever your day looks like, those can be really crucial moments to actually catch up and to reorientate with where we are at. So that is my offer for you today, is a guilt-free cup of tea. Yeah, definitely.